The UK Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron has arrived in Jerusalem for talks with Israel's leaders about their response to Iran's drone and missile attack over the weekend. He's also expected to discuss the continuing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The United Nations is launching a $2.8 billion appeal to provide aid to the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip and occupied West Bank, with 90% of the money going towards Gaza. Meanwhile, as Israel continues to meet to decide how and when it might respond to Iran's missile and drone attack, the US and EU look to impose new sanctions on Iran. The White House has said they will target Iran's missile and drone program, and EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said the bloc was working on a sanctions plan after a number of EU nations requested a tough response. Well, let's get the latest with our diplomatic correspondent James Landell, who's in Jerusalem. James, welcome to you. What can we expect from David Cameron's visit there?
Well, I expect him to continue the message of restraint that Western leaders have been calling for ever since Iran attacked this country with missiles and drones over the weekend. The Prime Minister had a call with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night, in which he said escalation was in no one's interest. It would only deepen the insecurity of the region. It was time for calm heads to prevail. As well as that message, though, I think the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, will also be talking to the Israelis about what more they can do to get aid in to Gaza. That's something that has been, I think, the focus has moved away from that because of the attention on Iran. And I think also the Foreign Secretary is going to try and return some of the pressure back onto those talks to try and get a ceasefire in Gaza, saying, look, it's up to Hamas to accept a deal. So I think those are the areas that he's likely to discuss when he meets Israeli leaders and also those Palestinian leaders in the occupied West Bank.
James, what more do we know about possible sanctions the US and EU are discussing over Iran?
Well, the Americans said yesterday that they are going to introduce new sanctions on Iran, specifically over attacking the supply chains that allow Iran to build drones and build their missiles. The EU are also talking about that. There's a meeting of G7 foreign ministers in Italy later on today that Lord Cameron will also be at. They're also going to be talking about sanctions as well. So I think there's an attempt to try and keep this coalition of support for Israel that has grown as a result of Iran's attack at the weekend, and try to operationalize it, if you like, and say, look, let's see what we can do to put more pressure, both diplomatically and also economically, on Iran as a result. But remember, sanctions take a long time to have any practical impact. So in the short term, it's purely about political positioning and putting more pressure on Tehran.
OK, James, thank you. Well, let's speak now to Amin Saikal, Professor of Middle Eastern Studies at the Australian National University. Welcome to you. Thanks very much for being with us. Let's start with Iran. Several days on now from their attack on Israel. What's the view, do you think, in Iran from the upper echelons and those who were behind this decision to attack Israel directly? Do you think they view this as a success?
Well, from their perspective, it has been success because they basically wanted to re-establish deterrence and at the same time send a very strong signal to Israel that Iran is not a paper tiger, and it is prepared to protect its assets in the region because Iranian attack was very much in retaliation to Israel's bombing of the Iranian consulate in Damascus. But at the same time, Iran has made it clear that it's not there to open a big war with Israel, and its a retaliation was very measured, and it did not really cause a lot of damage to Israel, and it only targeted military bases. But of course, Israel was not able to deal with the Iranian missiles and drones on its own. In fact, many of those projectiles were shot down by the Americans and the British, and of course also to some extent Jordanians. So it also, the Iranian attack in a way showed Israel's vulnerability. In other words, Israel is no longer an invincible power and therefore the only power in the region, and Iranians have really made a stand.
Yeah, you say it was very measured. It crossed a red line by directly attacking Israel for the first time ever. And you say also re-establish deterrence, but we don't know what the Israeli response is going to be. And there are those calling for a direct strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, aren't they? So it could still escalate. And is that a risk that the Iranian regime is willing to take?
Well, absolutely, but now it depends on what Israel is going to do. And if Israel wants to attack Iranian military and nuclear facilities and oil resources, then obviously that is going to result in a much bigger escalation of this conflict. The Iranian side has made it clear that they will be responding to any Israeli attack in a much harsher way than they have in the past. And so therefore the scene is really set for the widening of this conflict unless Israel is restrained. And of course, this is what the United States and also some of its allies, including Britain, are trying to do to basically ask Israel not to retaliate, or at least not to retaliate in a way which could result in the expansion of the conflict.
Doesn't this leave Iran increasingly isolated and under pressure at home? We saw Jordan take part in shooting down some of those drones, didn't we? We haven't seen any of those regional allies come out in support, or regional countries come out in support of Iran. And the people of Iran are under pressure economically as well. There have been, of course, increasing protests against the regime over the past year, 18 months. So isn't actually the regime under more pressure?
Well, the regime is under pressure, and but I don't think the regime really expected that the Arab countries, or for that matter Jordan, really coming out in support of Iranian actions. I think the regime is fully aware that it does not have the love of everybody in the region, but it does have the support of Russia and has the support of China. Iran has got very close strategic ties with these two powers, and at the same time it has got plenty of assets in the region that it can use against Israel and against the international supporters of Israel if they decide to get involved in an Israeli-led war with Iran.
Armin Cycle, thank you.
My pleasure.
The United Nations has voiced concern about escalating violence in the occupied West Bank. It comes after a wave of attacks sparked by the killing of an Israeli teenager. The UN has accused Israel's security forces of active participation in attacks on Palestinians by Jewish settlers. The vast majority of the international community considers the settlements illegal under international law, although Israel disputes this. Here's Hugo Bishega.
Caught on CCTV, a man setting fire to a car as Israeli settlers storm a Palestinian village in the occupied West Bank. Israeli soldiers watch outside and appear to do nothing. Across the West Bank on the weekend, Israeli settlers went on a rampage. This was the village of Mukhair near Ramallah on Saturday. Settlers set houses and cars on fire, killing one man, Jihad Abu Aliyah. He was 25 and planning to get married in June.
Jihad was trying to prevent the settlers from breaking the house door of Sameh house, where dozens of the town residents arrived in the home to prevent them from burning the house. It wasn't the first time settlers attacked us, but we weren't expecting a huge number of them.
The violence was sparked by the disappearance of this Israeli boy, 14-year-old Benjamin Netanyahu. He went missing on Friday and a day later was found dead. The Israeli army says he was murdered. The attacks show how tensions in the West Bank are escalating. Since the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October, more than 460 Palestinians and 13 Israelis have been killed. If nothing changes, there will be even more violence. For this campaigner monitoring settlement activity, the situation is unprecedented.
I think that the level of the settlers' violence is the highest that I remember. They feel also a lot of support from the government and probably from the public, or at least their public, that their violence is kind of necessary against the evil, which are the Palestinians.
It's not only settler violence that's on the rise. Raids by the Israeli army have intensified, killing many Palestinians. The Israeli army says it's investigating the arson incident caught on CCTV. But across the West Bank, many Palestinians are living in fear. They wonder when the next attack will come. Hugo Bashega, BBC News, Jerusalem.